If you have not heard the song Bag Lady by urban R&B singer and actress Erykah Badu, you should. In the song, Erykah conveys the image of a homeless bag lady who carries various bags around with her. The lyrics of the song go like this: "Bag lady, you gonna hurt your back, carrying all them bags like that. I guess nobody ever told you. All you must hold on to is you, is you, is you. One day, all them bags gonna get in your way." She says it again. One day, all those bags will get in your way. So, pack light. Most of us have probably seen this homeless bag lady. You may have seen her looking in trash cans. You may have heard her talking to herself. You may have observed her wearing multiple layers of contrasting patterns and colors. You've seen her pushing a shopping cart full of her stuff. The bags represent her story, chapters of her life, remnants of her travels. The song acknowledges the past hurt in the bag lady's life and makes a connection between her pain and her baggage. The song leads us through metaphors and illustrations to a realization that perhaps all of us have baggage that we carry around with us. And although her bags can be seen, our stuff is less obvious. Often it remains hidden in the deepest recesses of our beings, only to emerge when we least expect it. I got a view into my stuff this past Christmas. Now, this story begins with a tragedy. A few weeks before Christmas, the boyfriend of my next door neighbor committed suicide in her driveway. And a few weeks later, my neighbor herself took her own life. During this time, I reflected on what had happened and wondered whether there was anything that I could have said or done that might have made a difference in their lives and in their ultimate choice. As a minister, I personally know people who struggle with depression, mental illness, and other social and physical ills. And the holidays in particular often serve only to increase their woes and anxieties. So, being sensitive to such issues, I wanted to respond. I wanted to respond in some way. I wanted to give back in some small measure. So for Christmas, my partner and I determined that we would open our home to those we knew who were estranged from their families, who had no family, or who would be alone on Christmas Day. So we called several of our friends and invited them to dinner. One of our friends knew someone else who might want to come, a stranger to us, but that was fine. Our table was open. So I began to prepare. I pulled out my fine linen, my fine china, crystal, and silver, and yes, I do have those things. I set a beautiful table and prepared this great feast in the high anticipation of a festive time of good fellowship with strangers and friends alike. The day of the feast, however, I received a call from one of my guests saying, "I'm sorry, but I'm sick. I'm not going to be able to make it." And then shortly thereafter, another guest called and said, "I'm sorry, but I have to work and I probably won't be able to come." And then when I went to pick up another guest, he never answered the door. So on my way back home, I began to feel a little down. And then I remembered the story about the Great Supper found in the 14th chapter of the Gospel of Luke, where Jesus tells a parable about a certain man who throws a great feast and invites many, but some of the invitees decline. So the man, being perturbed, tells his servants to go out into the highways and the hedges and invite others so that the banquet would be full. And now this was happening to me. I too had prepared a great meal and an invited special guest, only to have most of them decline my invitation on the day of the feast. Now, I really didn't care about them eating. I really wanted them to see my table. No. I really did care about them eating. I had prepared a spectacular meal, and I too was a little perturbed that they had declined my friendly gesture and generosity. And I began to pout, saying to myself how that I had counted my blessings. I had opened my heart and my home in order to give back, and this is what I get in return. But as soon as I made that turn onto my street, in the midst of my complaining, there she was, looking around as if she had just been transported to that very spot at that very moment. Who, you ask? It was none other than the bag lady, standing there with a shopping cart full of her stuff. Now, some of you may know that I have been struggling with the notion of God lately. But I can tell you this, at that very moment, I knew there was a God, because only a God could set up a perfect scenario as this one. As soon as I passed her, turning onto my street, I heard the voice of God from on high, and then God said to me, "So, how open is your table?" I began to reason with myself and to make excuses and assumptions as to why that bag lady didn't belong at my table. I thought to myself, what will my other guests think if I brought this woman home? I could see myself walking in and saying, "Guess who's coming to dinner?" But I had the strong feeling that at least one of my guests would get up and leave. Now, I didn't know her story, but I've been around homeless people before. So can I be honest? Please. First, I thought to myself, she's going to smell really bad, and it will not go well with the other aromas at my table. Can I be honest? I also thought that she would be mentally challenged, and I said to myself, she's going to be rambling, incoherent, and not being able to hold an intelligent conversation. Now, I just said what probably most of us think. But in the midst of my dilemma, I knew that if I didn't respond to this woman, all of my experiences as a minister, all the memorials, the weddings, the sermons, all of my ministerial credentials would not be worth the paper they were written on. How could I sit at my own supposedly open table, having refused to invite someone from the highways and the hedges? So then, in my mind's eye, I began to picture this woman's presence as being more than just one I could barely tolerate at my table. I began to see her seated at the head of my table, being celebrated as my most honored guest. It was then, the moment I began to celebrate her in my mind, that I was able to turn back around. I pulled up alongside her and I said, "Hello. Can you tell me what you are eating for Christmas dinner?" I was surprised that she was quite a bit more articulate than I expected. She said quite contentedly, "Well, I have some popcorn, some candy, and some water, and I'm just fine." Then I was amazed at how effortlessly the next few words eased from my lips. "I would like to invite you to my house for Christmas dinner." There it was. She paused, looked straight at me, and then said, "Thank you. I really appreciate the offer, but I can't leave my stuff." The song says, one day, all them bags gonna get in your way. Now, I was a little relieved that she couldn't leave her stuff. But only for a second. And then reality set in. In that moment, I realized that I had just as many bags as she did. And my baggage wasn't pretty either. Although I was able to lay some of my bags aside in order to respond to this situation, the struggle itself brought me to the realization that I was biased towards someone I didn't know. An African American homeless woman who could easily be one of my relatives. I didn't know her story, but I thought I knew mine. I remember the words of Socrates, "Know thyself." Rarely do we know why people are the way they are, why people are homeless, broken, or dysfunctional. And rarely do we seek to discover what the late Paul Harvey used to call the rest of the story. Usually because there is so much stuff in the way. We must become aware of our stuff. We must be conscious and mindful of what is driving and informing us in our assumptions of the other. We must set aside our uninformed beliefs that we project onto others, especially the stuff that prevents us from viewing the other as fully human. The bag lady story is our story. It's yours and mine. So someday you too may be challenged to let your stuff go in order for you to be able to respond more adequately to the needs of others. In order to get to the next stage beyond our prejudices, and in some cases beyond our privileges, and to be able to sit at the welcome table of a larger fellowship, we sometimes need to let go. However, like the warning in some reality TV shows, I must give a disclaimer too. Do not attempt this at your home. Inviting the bag lady to my home was my challenge. For the safety of one's family and possessions, I would discourage any of you from doing the same. But while we cannot all invite strangers into our homes and our lives, perhaps we can at least invite them to a conversation. Look around you. You will see diverse people in various stations of life who are different from you in their skin colors, their religious and sexual orientations, or the number of tattoos and piercings they have. The next time you run into someone who is different, ask them what they are having for Christmas dinner. Or simply, how are you doing? And perhaps in the process, learn the rest of their story. May it be so. Amen.